The last thing my father said to me wasn't "I love you" or "take care." It was, "You're a disgrace. You'll come crawling back in a month, begging us to forgive you. Maybe then you'll have learned your lesson." That was 10 years ago. There, still waiting for me to crawl back. The only call I ever got? It was them, begging me to save them. They say blood is thicker than water. It's a phrase you hear at family gatherings, a nice little reminder of some unbreakable bond. But what happens when the people who are supposed to be your anchor are the ones who cut you loose? What happens when the blood that runs in your veins feels more like a poison than a promise? My family taught me that blood isn't a bond, it's a condition. And because I refused to meet their conditions, I wasn't theirs anymore. They called me worthless, said my dreams were just a pathetic fantasy. Then, at 20 years old, they showed me the door and told me not to come back. They couldn't have known, and honestly, neither could I, that the worthless son they threw away would one day be the only success story they had left. The dream and the door growing up. My house felt like a museum of dead dreams. My father gave up a passion for carpentry to take a stable job in middle management. A job that slowly wore him down until all that was left was a short temper and a whole lot of bitterness. My mom had dreamed of being a painter. Her canvases were now just collecting dust in the attic, swapped out for a life she felt trapped in. Their dreams had died, and in their place grew a rigid set of rules and expectations. For their two sons, my older brother Mark was the poster child for their hand-me-down ambitions. He was going to be a lawyer, dating the right kind of girl, and never ever colored outside the lines. He was their masterpiece, proof that their sacrifices meant something. And then there was me. I didn't care about law books or climbing some corporate ladder. I was fascinated by code. From the first time I wrote a simple Hello World program on a clunky old computer, I was hooked. It felt like magic, creating entire worlds, solving impossible problems, building something real, from nothing but lines of text. It was the most exciting thing in the world. My dream was to be a software developer, to start my own company, to build things that people would actually use. To my parents, this wasn't a dream. It was a joke. Computer nerd. My father would sneer. "You'll end up in our basement? Playing video games your whole life? Is that what you want? To be a nobody?" My passion was just a dumb hobby to them, a personal insult to the safe, respectable life they had planned. Mark was the future lawyer. I was the future basement weller. The story was already written. The fights started in high school when I picked computer science over economics. They got worse when I spent weekends building a simple app instead of studying for the LSATs I was never going to take. My dad saw it as defiance. My mom saw it as her own personal failure. "What will we tell our friends?" she'd ask, her voice shaking with shame. "That our son wants to play on his computer for a living." The breaking point came right after my 20th birthday. I got accepted into a top-tier coding boot camp. It was an intense 3-month program known for launching tech careers. It wasn't a 4-year degree, so to my parents, it wasn't real. It was also expensive. I'd saved up every penny I'd ever made to pay for half of it, hoping they'd see how serious I was and help with the rest. I decided to tell them at Sunday dinner, our weekly performance of The Perfect Family. Mark had just been talking about his new internship at a law firm. My parents were just beaming with pride. Then it was my turn. I laid the boot camp brochure on the table. I explained everything: the curriculum, the job placement rates, the future of the industry. I spoke with more passion than I'd ever shown them, just hoping they would finally see the fire in my eyes. Not just the glow of a screen. Silence. Just a heavy, suffocating silence. My father put his fork down, which was always the signal that a storm was coming. He looked at the brochure like it was a piece of trash I'd just put on his dinner plate. "So this is your grand plan," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "To waste your life and our money on this scam." "It's not a scam, Dad. It's the future. It's my future. Your future," he scoffed, "is in a real profession. like your brothers." He waved his hand toward Mark, who was just staring at his plate, refusing to look at me. "We didn't raise you to throw your life away." The argument that followed was years in the making. My mother cried, not for me, but for the perfect family photo she had in her head. My father's voice got louder and louder, his words turning into weapons. He called my dream pathetic, a fantasy. He called me lazy, ungrateful, a failure. And in the heat of it all, with his words ringing in my ears, I said something I couldn't take back. "It's my life, not yours. I won't end up miserable and bitter like you, regretting everything you were too scared to do." The slap was so hard my ears rang. "Oh." My father, his face twisted with rage, stood over me. "Get out," he whispered, and that whisper was colder than any shout. "What?" I stammered, my cheek on fire. "Get out of my house," he repeated, louder this time. "If you think you're so smart, if this little fantasy is worth more than your family, then go. But don't you dare come back here when you fail. When you walk out that door, you are no longer my son." I looked at my mom, her face buried in her hands. I looked at my brother. He finally met my eyes, and his expression was a weird mix of fear and maybe pity, but he didn't say a word. Nobody did. Silence was all the confirmation I needed. My dream was the price of admission to the family. And they weren't having it. I walked out that night with a backpack of clothes and the hot shame of their rejection burning in my chest. The door slammed shut, and in that sound I didn't just lose a home. I lost everything I thought I knew about who I was. I was completely, terrifyingly alone. The grind and the ghost of failure those first few weeks were a blur of cheap motels and crashing on friends' couches. Every night I'd lie awake, staring at a ceiling that wasn't mine. And my father's words would just play on a loop. "You will come crawling back." That thought became this ghost that haunted every single thing I did. Being cut off like that, it's a kind of pain you feel deep in your bones. It's pain that made me question my own worth. I was 20 years old with no safety net, the boot camp. Tuition took most of my savings and I still owed the rest. So I took any job I could get. I washed dishes in a greasy diner until 2 a.m., my hands raw and smelling like bleach. I worked as a night security guard in an empty warehouse where the silence just made my anxiety scream louder. I delivered pizzas, and every knock on a stranger's door was a sick reminder of the one that had been slammed in my face. And during the day I was at the boot camp, that place was my only sanctuary. I threw myself into the work with this manic energy. Other students were networking, socializing. I was the quiet guy in the corner, headphones on, just trying to absorb every line of code like my life depended on it, because it did. Failure wasn't an option. It was the ghost whispering my father's predictions in my ear. Proving him wrong became the only thing that mattered. The rejection, as much as it hurt, became my fuel. There were days I almost broke. I remember one night, sitting in my beat-up car after a 10-hour shift, just too exhausted to even drive to the friend's couch I was sleeping on. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days, just coffee and crackers from the break room. I pulled out my phone and just hovered my thumb over my mother's number. The need to hear a kind word, just the comfort of her voice, was a physical ache. I could almost hear myself saying it. "You were right. I'm sorry. I want to come home." But then I imagined what would happen next. This smug look on my father's face. The "I told you so" that would follow me for the rest of my life. That would be it, the final surrender? And that fear of living their life instead of mine was stronger than the hunger and the exhaustion. I put the phone down and drove to a 24-hour library instead. I stayed there all night, practicing code until the sun came up. The boot camp was brutal. But for the first time, I felt like I actually belonged. I wasn't the weird kid anymore. I was a developer. I found a mentor in an instructor named David. He was an old-school tech guy, and he saw the desperation fueling my work. He never asked about my family. He just saw something in me. He'd stay late to help, gave me old programming books, and most importantly, he told me I had a gift. "You don't just write code," he said one day, looking over my project. "You see how things should be built. That's not something you can teach." His words were a lifeline. In a world where my own family told me I was worthless, he gave me a sense of value. He became part of this new support system. I was slowly building a family based on respect, not on conditions. At the end of the boot camp, we had a final project: build a fully functional app. I decided to solve a problem I was living through. I created a simple budgeting app for people with irregular incomes, people juggling multiple part-time jobs. I called it Flow. It was born from my own frantic spreadsheets trying to manage my tiny earnings. I poured everything I had into it. On presentation day, I was terrified. But I got up there and walked everyone, students, instructors, a few tech recruiters, through my app. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then, a recruiter from a big startup raised her hand. "Is this live?" she asked. "Can I download it right now?" That single question, that was the moment everything started to change. The first taste of success, that recruiter's company offered me a job. The salary was more money than I'd ever even imagined. The very first thing I did was rent a tiny one-bedroom apartment. It was basically empty, just a mattress on the floor and a desk for my computer, but it was mine. I remember sitting on the floor that first night, eating a pizza out of the box and just crying. Not sad tears, but tears of pure relief. I did it. I had survived. I wasn't crawling back. I was standing on my own 2 feet. I loved the job. I was surrounded by brilliant people. I was learning every day, and I was helping build things that millions of people were using. I wasn't an outcast. I was an asset in my spare time. I kept working on Flow. I used the feedback I'd gotten to make it better, cleaner, and more useful. 6 months after I started my job, I launched it on the App Store. I had no money for marketing. I just posted about it on a few online forums. At first, a few downloads a day. Then, something started to happen. People who used it seemed to love it. They left amazing reviews. They told their friends. Then, a popular tech blog wrote a small piece on it, calling it the best budgeting app you've never heard of. The day that article came out, my phone exploded. Thousands of downloads turned into tens of thousands. My server crashed. I spent a frantic, sleepless weekend rebuilding everything to handle the traffic. It was the most stressful and incredible 48 hours of my life. Within 3 months, Flow had over 100,000 users. It was even making a little money from a premium version. But it was never about the money. It was the emails I got from users. It's people telling me my app helped them get out of debt or just feel in control of their finances for the first time. My pathetic fantasy was actually helping people. But success was weird. Every time I hit a big milestone, like 1 million users, I'd feel this strange sadness. These were the moments I should have been calling my mom about. I'd instinctively reach for my phone before remembering that I couldn't. I was succeeding in a vacuum, and the silence from my past was deafening. About 2 years after I launched Flow, I got an email that changed my life. It was from a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. They'd been watching Flow's growth. They wanted to meet. I flew to California, my heart pounding, feeling like a total imposter. I walked into this slick, glass-walled boardroom and pitched my app to people who had funded some of the biggest companies in the world. I told them Flow's story, not my story, but the app's story. 2 weeks later, they made an offer. They wanted to invest $2 million. I just stared at the number on the paper. $2 million. It felt like a typo. This wasn't just success. This was a different reality entirely. The kind of success my family, with their obsession with respectable careers, could never even wrap their heads around. I took the offer, quit my job, and moved to California. I hired my first employees. We were building something real, and the world was noticing. My dream wasn't a secret anymore. It was a real company, and I was the CEO. It's a strange journey going from being completely lost to finding your purpose. If there's anyone out there who feels like their dreams are being shot down, or you're fighting a battle that nobody else gets, I see you. The road is tough, but it's yours. Share your story in the comments. Let's build a place where we can lift each other up. The unraveling and the phone call the next 5 years were a blur. I lived and breathed the company. We grew, we made mistakes, we got better. Flo became a household name in personal finance, speaking interviews for magazines, speaking at conferences, and I even ended up on one of those 30 under 30 lists. My life was a whirlwind. I had built a new family with my team and a new life from the ashes of my old one. I barely ever thought about them anymore. The pain was just a feint. Scar, I figured they must have known about my success. Would have been hard to miss, but I never heard a word. No call, no email, nothing. Their silence just proved I'd made the right choice. I had moved on then. One random Tuesday afternoon, a number from my old hometown flashed on my phone. I almost ignored it. Spam call. But something made me answer. Hello? Is this you? The voice was shaky, weak, and I knew it instantly. It was my mother. Hearing her voice after a decade was like an electric shock. I was just silent for a moment, my mind racing. Mom, finally said. She just started sobbing. Oh, thank God. I wasn't sure. I didn't know if you'd pick up. Why are you calling? My tone was colder than I meant it to be. That wall I'd built around that part of my life went up instantly. It's your brother, she cried, and your father. We're in trouble. We need your help. My first feeling was just pure, white-hot anger. 10 years of absolute silence, and this is how they break it. Not to say sorry, not to ask how I am, but because they need something. What kind of trouble? I asked, my voice flat, professional. The voice I used for business. Through her tears, she told me the whole story. Mark, their golden boy, didn't have such a great career after all. He'd joined an investment firm, tried to live a life he couldn't afford, and started making illegal trades with client money. He got caught. He wasn't just fired. He was facing serious federal charges. The legal fees were astronomical. My parents, trying to save him, had drained their retirement, mortgaged their house, borrowed money from everyone they knew. And it still wasn't enough. They were about to lose everything. The lawyer says Mark could go to prison for a long time. My mother whispered, Your father. He had a heart attack from the stress. He's okay, but the doctor said he can't take any more. We have nowhere else to turn. We saw you in a magazine. We know you've done so well. Please, you're our only hope. The irony was so thick I could hardly breathe. The failure they kicked out was now their only lifeline. The worthless fantasy had built an empire, while their perfect son had burned their lives to the ground. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. I just sat there in my office, looking out at the city lights, and felt a decade of buried emotions come flooding back. A dark part of me wanted to say no, to let them feel the desperation I felt, to let them face the consequences of their choices, just like I had. But another part of me felt something else. Not love, not forgiveness, but a weird sense of responsibility, not to them, to the man I'd become. The boy they kicked out would have loved watching them burn. But the man I was now, he was a problem solver, okay? And this was the most complicated problem I'd ever faced. The confrontation and the cost of success. I flew to my hometown the next day. I didn't go to their house. I had my assistant book the biggest suite in the most expensive hotel in the city, and I told them to meet me there. I needed to control the situation. This was a meeting, not a reunion. When they walked in, I saw 10 years of hardship on their faces. My father looked smaller, older, defeated. He was leaning on a cane and wouldn't even look at me. My mother just looked exhausted, her eyes red and puffy. They looked like strangers. They just stood there awkwardly, swallowed by this huge, opulent room. "Sit down," I said. My voice was calm. I stayed standing. It was deliberate. My mother started crying again. "Thank you for seeing us." My father, finally, looked at me, and in his eyes I didn't see anger. I saw a deep, crushing shame. "Your mother's right," he said, his voice raspy. I was wrong. About everything. It was the closest I was ever going to get to an apology. And the crazy thing is, it didn't feel good. Spent years dreaming of that moment of him admitting it. But seeing him so broken, all the arrogance gone, I just felt empty. "I've looked at the situation," I said, getting straight to business. "Mark's case is bad. He was reckless and arrogant. But I've retained a top legal team. They think they can negotiate a plea deal. He'll still face consequences, but they might keep him out of prison." Relief washed over my mother's face. "Oh, thank you," she breathed. "Don't thank me yet," I said, holding up a hand. "This comes with conditions. My conditions." I laid it all out. I would cover all of Mark's legal fees. I would pay off their mortgage and their debts. I'd set up a trust for my father's medical care. I would solve their problem. But I said, my voice hardening, "This is a transaction, not a gift. You aren't my family. You gave up that right 10 years ago. From now on, our relationship is purely financial. If you won't call me, you won't visit. Any communication goes through my financial advisor. I am wiping your slate clean, but I am not letting you back in my life." I let that sink in. One more thing, I'm not doing this for you or for Mark. I'm doing this because I can. Because the boy you threw out on the street built a life where he could solve a multi-million-dollar problem without blinking. This is for him. This is his victory, not your salvation. My father just nodded, his eyes filling with tears. My mother sobbed. They had no choice. They had no power here. I stood up. The meeting was over. My advisor will be in touch. As they walked out, my father stopped at the door. He turned back. "I am proud of you," he choked out. "Even if I don't have the right to be." Then he closed the door, and I was alone again in that vast, silent room. The definition of family. I never saw them in person again. My lawyers handled Mark's case. He avoided prison, but his career was over. My finance team cleared my parents' debts. They got to live out their lives in the house they almost lost. Their future secured by the son they disowned. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. Was it revenge? Forgiveness? I don't think it was either. It was closure. It was the final chapter in the story that had defined me for so long. That whole experience taught me what success really is. It's not the money or the awards. Real success is the freedom to write your own rules. The freedom to be who you were meant to be, not who someone else decided you should be. It's knowing your own worth. Even when the people who are supposed to love you most can't see it. My family isn't defined by blood anymore. It's defined by choice. It's my team at work. It's the friends who gave me a couch to sleep on. It's the community I built my company to serve. These are my people. They say blood is thicker than water. Maybe so. But for me, the water I found when I was completely alone turned out to be far more life-giving than the blood I was born into. For that, I am grateful. Thank you for listening to my story. If any of this hit home for you, please subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more than you know. Hey, and remember, whatever you're facing, you have the power to write your own ending. Your journey is valid, your dreams matter, and you're not alone.